Good morning and welcome to this year's Bench Bar Breakfast. Judges, we especially want to welcome you to the State Bar of Texas annual meeting. It's been my great privilege to serve as co-chair along with Leslie Dipple of this year's annual meeting. Our committee has worked hard to plan a great program and want to thank you all for being here this morning. We hope that you enjoy the day and take advantage of a full day of CLE. We are here today to honor our Texas judges. So I'd like to turn the program over to Judge Melody Wilkinson, Chair of the Judicial Section of the State Bar of Texas. Judge Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Randy. And on behalf of all of the judges in the state of Texas, I want to thank the State Bar of Texas for this wonderful bench bar breakfast and this wonderful annual meeting, and for allowing all of the judges in the state of Texas to participate in today's meeting at no cost. We very much appreciate that opportunity to get all of this great CLE. I've also enjoyed my year of service as serving as a liaison to the State Bar Board of Directors, and it's very sad that my year has come to an end on that, because it was wonderful to see so many friends and to meet new friends. But I've certainly had an opportunity to witness firsthand all of the great work that the State Bar of Texas is doing, and I'm very proud to be a member of the State Bar of Texas. And now I am going to turn the program over to our State Bar of Texas President, Laura Gibson.
Thank you, Judge Wilkinson, and thank you for being one of the 12 people, not you, Randy, who stayed to the bitter end at the President's Party. I never knew what pressure there was to stay up and out on the dance floor when you're the host of the party. I called it quits, right? I went to the band and said 3 more, and then we're done. We cannot hang any longer. But it was a fun time, and thank you for those of you who were there, and thank you for being here this morning. Judge Wilkinson, we're so honored to have had you be our liaison, and thank you for being one of the most boisterous out on the dance floor last night. And the fact that you're still in high heels shows you how hard you work and how much tenacity you have. We have appreciated you serving as our liaison to the board this year. You know, the board really benefits from knowing what's going on in the judiciary, and Judge Wilkinson did a great job keeping us informed. And I know your replacement will start in September, and she's got big shoes to fill. So I know that y'all have seen our Chief Justice Nathan Hecht be at this meeting everywhere, and he does that every year, and he speaks at this breakfast every year, and we're so honored to hear from him. As you know, Nathan Hecht is the 27th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Texas, the longest-serving member of the court in Texas history, and the senior Texas appellate judge in active service. He's widely respected for his distinguished service, his commitment to the rule of law, and his efforts to ensure that Texans living in poverty and others with modest incomes have access to basic legal services. Justice Hecht, thank you for supporting the 2023 annual meeting and for celebrating our Texas judges who are here with us today. Please welcome Justice Hecht.
Thank you very much, Laura. And thank you, Judge Wilkinson. I join you in thanking the State Bar for this annual bench bar breakfast and its recognition of the more than 3,000 judges who serve the people of Texas. Glad to have my colleagues here this morning. We'll hear from Senior Justice Debra Lehrmann before too long. Justice Jeff Boyd is here. Justice Jimmy Blacklock has been here. Sorry? Yes. We do all this in seniority, Laura saw. So she'll get her turn, but Justice Brett Busby is here, Justice Jane Bland, as you've heard, Justice Rebecca Huddle, and our newest judge, Justice Evan Young, who's not so new anymore. He's been around plenty already. So from the Court of Criminal Appeals, I think Jesse McClure is here, and Morris Overstreet, a former member of the Court of Criminal Appeals, is here. And I'd introduce other judges, but it's supposed to be about judges, so I just glad to be among my colleagues here of the bench. Let me just mention a few things that are going on in the Texas judiciary, some of which you may know and some of which you may not. Dockets, as we discussed this time last year at the meeting in Houston, dockets are returning to pre-COVID levels. Through the end of 2022, our court's docket was up slightly, back about where it was before COVID. The Court of Criminal Appeals docket is down quite a bit because the filings of criminal cases during the pandemic and just the working of the cases through the system. The Courts of Appeals dockets are way up, maybe about 25%. And the 80 Court of Appeals justices in the state have been working very hard to keep up with their increasing workload. The filings in the trial courts are pretty much steady, and except for the JPs and the municipal courts, which are up quite a bit. Interestingly, misdemeanors are down to historic levels, and felonies are staying about the same. Our court expects to clear its docket of argued cases this time next week. We had 66 argued cases this year, one of them settled, leaving 65. We still have 14 left to issue. Orders will be out here before too long this morning, and then we hope to have the others out by next Friday, June the 30th. Clearing our docket of argued cases for the 9th year in a row. By contrast, the Supreme Court of the United States argued only 59 cases as opposed to our 66, and they've issued 42, so they have 17 to go as opposed to our 14. So we're doing a lot better than they are, but comparisons are odious. So we'll issue about 90 opinions this year. It's down a little bit from last year, but pretty much the same. Since we met a year ago, backlogs are beginning to be erased. As I said, the courts of appeals essentially do not have backlogs. The trial courts still have backlogs in criminal cases, mostly in felony cases, but they're working through those. The civil, family, and juvenile courts are all digging out, and so we're in pretty good shape. Last year it looked a little scary, but this year I think we can take comfort in all of the good work that's been done. Bail reform we talked about last year, Senate Bill 6, and it's now been 15 months in operation. There were a lot of changes proposed to it this year in the 88th legislature, and none of them passed. Almost none of them passed. But it was kind of a difficult session, as I'm sure you've read in the press, and still ongoing. One thing that people have not fully recognized, I think, is the public reporting of bail decisions that Senate Bill 6 requires. And in the 15 months that the act has been in place, there have been 625,640 bail report forms filed with the Office of Court Administration as of last night. So that's almost 10,000 forms a week, and eventually there'll be some way of analyzing those reports to see what the bail decisions look like, not just episodic stories that you get in the press, but some analysis of the bail system in Texas, so that'll be good. Last year we also talked about emergency orders, and they were ongoing. When we issued our first emergency order on March 13, 2020, Friday the 13th, we had worked on it for a couple of days and were ready to issue it. And my colleague, Justice Boyd, suggested that we number them, the emergency orders, and I thought well, that's a silly idea. Why would we number them? This will be over before too long. So the 59th emergency order expired February the 1st, and I believe it's the last one. We have an emergency order helping the eviction diversion program that expires on July 1st, next Saturday, and there will likely be no renewal of that. So we're probably out of the emergency order business except to facilitate criminal proceedings in Operation Lone Star down in the valley. It's very important, we think, to carry forward the ideas that we have learned during the pandemic. One of them is remote proceedings, and so we began with just encouraging trial judges to use remote proceedings as they saw fit. Then as time passed, we began to put some structure to that, and now we have Rule of Civil Procedure 21D, and for the JPs, 500.10. There were minor changes to the remote proceedings procedures in the session, but nothing very significant. So the procedures that we have in the new rules of civil procedure seem to be settling in. We're very disappointed as judges that there was no increase in judicial compensation during the 88th legislature. There has been no increase in the base compensation since 2013, and we are now below 1981 levels. We're in the bottom few states in the country, but we can take heart that we're tied with Guam. I said tied with Guam in our judicial compensation. I tell the story that when I was appointed to the district court in 1981, the United States district judges were paid $2,500 more than a state district judge in Dallas County. And now a United States district judge is paid $92,000 more, two-thirds, a third more than the Texas district court base salary. So it has slipped a lot. The gap has widened. It really is becoming critical, and we made a very strong pitch for increase during the 88th legislature, and we will continue to work on that during the special sessions and in the months ahead. We are glad that the House of Representatives voted a significant pay raise, 150 to 0. It was unanimous in the House. You looked pretty hard for bills this last session that passed anywhere unanimously, but that one passed the House unanimously. The Senate voted for a third-tier pay raise and an increase for appellate judges, but the House would not concur. So, as I say, the situation is critical, and we'll continue to work on it, and we urge our friends in the bar to help us work for increases in judicial compensation so that we can continue to attract good candidates, good judges to the bench. You've all heard that we have a new addition to our judicial system, business courts. So they will begin operation on September 1st, 2024. Also a 15th Court of Appeals that is associated with the business court creation, but somewhat different. So we'll be working on rules changes to ensure that those courts operate both procedurally and administratively smoothly and the way they should. Our advisory committee to the Supreme Court, a 50-member committee that advises us on rules of procedure and administration, is already at work on those. And as always, that is an open process, a transparent process. I've already been approached by a couple of people here at the meeting. Can we send you what we think about those rules as they develop? And I said, absolutely. you're welcome to do that, and we'll be happy to consider all comments before the rules take effect for the courts to go into operation a little over a year from now, September 1st, 24. The legislature was very supportive and generous to us for access to justice, as it has been for now 15 years, and they continued all the support that we have had in the past. The general appropriation to the court, access to justice for veterans, for sexual abuse survivors, and other groups. This time they provided $3.7 million for access to justice programs for children, particularly those that have had legal problems develop as a result of the pandemic. So we presented that program. We have a very strong Access to Justice Commission and Foundation, and they presented this, and I can tell you that the legislature doesn't give us that money because they like us. They give it to us because it works, and it does a good thing, and they can see that. And so we're very proud of the work that Access to Justice is doing. The Children's Commission and the Judicial Commission on Mental Health are both operating as they have been, very strong. The Mental Health Commission will hold its annual summit this fall. I think the last time, the last summit, they had like 1,400 people registered. This is an enormous number of people who are interested in the mental health issues of the judiciary. So this is not just society in general. This is as mental health issues affect the justice system. So we're very proud of that work, and the Children's Commission as well, in having helped us keep those courts current during the pandemic. Artificial intelligence. I'm real this morning, but you can't always tell. So I was at an ALI meeting several weeks ago, and there was an introduction like this, except it was by video, and it was presented by the host of the meeting, and at the conclusion of it, the person on the video said, "Actually, I'm not a person. I'm just a fake. I made myself up. Nobody had anything to do with making this video. This was all a product of artificial intelligence." So it's here to stay. We already have a court order in Texas, in the Northern District of Texas, requiring lawyers to certify that pleadings have either not been generated by AI, or if they have been, or GBT, or if they have been, that somebody has looked it over and given it a human stamp of approval. I noticed yesterday in the press another judge in the country sanctioned lawyers for filing a brief that had GBT generated case sites in it. So this is upon us. The Congress is having hearings during the rest of the year on the issue. We had a presentation at the Fifth Circuit Judicial Conference in May, and it was fairly sobering about the changes that are likely to happen. But the most sobering thing I thought was again at the ALI, the presentation there included the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, saying that get ready because it's going to be bigger changes than you think. So when the president of Microsoft says that, I think we would be best to heed his counsel. And so we will have to think about what that means for the practice and what it means for the courts, and how we will begin to use AI. There was a piece in the press this morning saying that a lot of firms already in other parts of the world are finding that AI is greatly increasing their productivity and reducing their costs. So we'll see what comes of all of that but we're already beginning to look hard at that. And I'll close on this note. I had to add this in my State of the Judiciary address, but I thought I should say it here as well. I do grow concerned that political divisions among us threaten the judicial independence essential to the rule of law. President Trump notably criticized a court ruling as being by, quote, an Obama judge. Chief Justice John Roberts, you may remember, said there was no such thing, only an extraordinary group of dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them. That exchange prompted a response from Rhode Island Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, rated, I think he would be proud of, one of the most liberal members of Congress. He agreed with the president, sort of. In spite of my distaste for Trump's attacks on our judiciary, Senator Whitehouse wrote in an op-ed piece, on this one, the facts are with Trump. Except that, he said, the facts show that Republican judicial appointees in general and those on the Roberts Supreme Court in particular show no respect for precedent, federalism, originalism, or judicial restraint. In other words, the judiciary certainly deserves to be attacked, only by me, not by you. So the left and right and leaders in both the executive and legislative branches are in agreement. Judges are not independent, and they shouldn't be. They should take sides, my side, which is not the first time we've heard that in our nation's history. President Roosevelt famously tried to change the composition of the court because he objected to its decisions. But it seems especially strong right now, to me at least, and something that we must guard very much against. The night before I gave the State of the Judiciary address back in April, Wisconsin had the most expensive judicial campaign in the nation's history. They spent 45 voters, electors, people in Wisconsin, people outside Wisconsin, spent $45 million or $25 a vote in that election, and most of the press surrounding it was extremely political. So it seems to me to be an increasing pressure that we must resist. And then, on the other hand, you have Justice Jackson joining an opinion by Justice Gorsuch with Justice Barrett in dissent. And everybody's scratching their head and saying, well, wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen. They're all supposed to be on the same, this side or that side. And the press was pretty much flabbergasted, I thought, by that development. But those of us who are judges, and I hope the bar recognizes that our judges are trying very hard to make the best decision they can to follow the law and apply it to the parties equally without fear or favor in every single case. But amongst the public that has some doubt about that, we have to make that message stronger. And I hope the bar will help show that the public can disagree with a particular decision without tearing down judicial institutions. We can't let partisan pressures and political attacks weaken the judiciary. They destroy the rule of law essential to justice for all. I've, in my 42nd year on the bench, and my 35th on the Texas Supreme Court, as past president of the National Conference of Chief Justices, I've been privileged to work every day with judges across the country to ensure that the justice system is working for all. That experience has confirmed my conviction and pride in the good work of Texas judges. We are all pleased to be here this morning to join you in this breakfast. Thank you for hosting us, and we look forward to the Senior Justice Lehrmann's program. Thank you.
Yes. That was the funniest address I've heard in a long time. That cheered me up. Thank you for your service, Justice Heck. Please know that your State Bar of Texas is here to support our judiciary, and we appreciate all you do, and we respect your independence and your commitment to the rule of law. And I want everyone in this room that's not aware to know that Texas and our judges, especially Justice Heck, are well regarded throughout our nation. When we went to Washington, D.C. for ABA Days to ask for support for legal service aid, Justice Heck was one of the primary speakers, and Harriet Myers was there leading the charge. So you should know that our Texas judges are doing an excellent job, and they are underpaid, and we need to remedy that. Guam and Texas are not in the same sentence. So now it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce this morning's keynote speakers, Senior Justice Debra Lehrmann and Timothy Berg. Justice Debra Lehrmann is the Senior Justice of the Supreme Court of Texas and the court's longest-serving woman justice in Texas history. She's got almost 35 years of judicial experience. She was a trial judge in Tarrant County prior to her appellate service. Nationally known, as I said, she is also well regarded and known not only in Texas but in the nation. She's a past chair of the Family Law Section of the American Bar Association. She's a commissioner on the Uniform Law Commission and a member of the American Law Institute. She's also been an active leader in the Texas legal community for many years. She served as the inaugural chair of the State Bar of Texas's Child Protection Law Section. She's an emeritus member and past president of the Lloyd Lockridge Inn of Court. She's a past president of the Texas chapter of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts and is a fellow of the American Bar Foundation, the Texas Bar Foundation, and the Tarrant County Bar Foundation. She's joined by Tim Berg, who is a distinguished attorney at Fenimore's Business Litigation Practice Group. He focuses primarily on the areas of civil appeals, state constitutional and public law, public records law, and public utilities regulation. He was appointed as an Arizona Uniform Law Commissioner in 1993, which means he's had 20 years of service in that capacity. He's been continuously reappointed by governors of both political parties. He currently serves as chair of the Executive Committee of the Uniform Law Commission, and over the years he's served as chair or a member of various drafting and study committees. And while he found the subject matter of each to be important and fascinating, he especially enjoyed chairing the drafting committees on the Model Tribal Secure Transaction Act and the Model Tribal Probate Code. Please join me in welcoming Justice Lehrmann and Tim Berg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that kind introduction. And I want to thank all of you for being here so early this morning. And I particularly want to thank my colleagues for coming. It was so wonderful for you all to get up early and be here, so thank you all for being here. So you all know me as Justice on the Supreme Court, of course, but I'm here today in another role. I'm here as a commissioner on the Uniform Law Commission. And many of you probably think, well, what is that? I mean, yesterday, Tim and I were going around, and people many times were getting it confused with the Uniform Bar Exam. So we're going to tell you all a little bit about what the Uniform Law Commission is and why you should care. I first got involved in the Uniform Law Commission because I was an advisor appointed by the American Bar Association to be involved in a drafting project. Excuse me. And I was so impressed with the process. Everything is done really on the up and up. It's not political. You don't have a lot of, deal making going on. That's just not how it happens. We have experts from around the country. We make sure that we have what we call stakeholders involved with competing views. And although these people may not agree on the final decisions that's made, everything is vetted fully and so that a good product results. And so I was so impressed with the process that I initiated a gubernatorial appointment to our Texas delegation. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about exactly what all that means for us in Texas and what that means for all of you. So let's start out with what is the ULC. Some of you may have remembered the term NACUSL, and that's what we used to be called, the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. And several years ago, one of our presidents, Howard Swibel from Chicago, hired a publicist to say, you know, nobody knows who NACUSL is. What should we do? And it said, number one thing, you need to change your name because this is a very, very confusing name. And so we've changed from NACUSL to the Uniform Law Commission. You all, of course, know about the UCC. We all studied for it for the bar, and of course are very, very involved with it in many of our cases. Well, we are the ones that draft the Uniform Commercial Code, and we update it very, very frequently. We've been involved with that with the American Law Institute since 1942. Our organization has been in existence since the late 1800s, as opposed to the American Law Institute, which I think was founded in 1923, something like that. So that's who we are, and I'm going to ask Tim to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. We are, in fact, the oldest state governmental organization in existence going back to 1892. And the reason that the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws was created in 1892 was that there was a perceived need to have uniform laws in areas of state law, so that having the federal government take it over and make the law uniform wasn't the right solution. The right solution was to have the same law from state to state to state. And as you think about how this country has changed since 1892 in terms of how much business is done across the country, how much people move around, particularly starting after the Second World War when we had just migrations of people from the Midwest and East to the West, it becomes more and more important to have this. We're an organization of legal professionals and state officials, and really what we do is draft statutory law. We have nothing to do with the common law, that's CALI, they do the restatements. But what we do is draft uniform acts, and obviously the best known one is the Uniform Commercial Code, which I'm sure all of you hated having to study for the bar exam when you took it however many years ago. But there are a lot of it, and we've had many distinguished former members of the conference. Chief Justice Rehnquist was an Arizona Uniform Law Commissioner like I am at one time, and he said, I've seen many deliberative bodies before and since, but that none of the discussions were of the same high quality as the ones I heard at the Uniform Law Commission. So it is a really impressive process. And if you ever get the opportunity, because our meetings are open, to come and attend an annual meeting or attend a drafting committee, you will be very impressed by what you see.
And the caliber of the members of the commission are really, really very, very high. As my colleagues know, I frequently talk about the three things that I think are so important, and I hope I go down in history as saying this, and that is, as all the members of our court are very intelligent, are very hardworking, and are very nice. And that third part is just as important as the other two. And I have observed Tim Berg over the years because during all of these deliberations, we see each other through drafting committees, but also as all of these acts are read from the floor. And he also possesses those three qualities that are so very important. So.
One sentence. The Uniform Law Commission is...
Can it be a lengthy sentence?
I'll try to keep it as short as I can. It's a national organization
made up of lawyers, judges, legislators, scholars.
Hundreds upon hundreds of volunteer attorneys.
Best lawyers in the country.
From diverse backgrounds and fields and geographic areas that
try to strike a balance.
The appropriate balance.
Between diversity and uniformity.
where everybody has come to the table.
A lot of different interests and experienced people.
To find solutions that are not based on ideology, but are based on good government, good policy.
It's a nonpartisan, highly professional approach.
To solve some very significant current issues. And
attempt to draft well-crafted and well-conceived,
wise and uniform laws.
Word by word.
Line by line.
An incomparable product.
On specified subjects for which uniformity of law is considered to be beneficial.
For example,
Uniform Determination of Death Act.
Uniform Unclaimed Property Act.
The Uniform Military and Overseas Voting Act.
Uniform Probate Code.
The Environmental Covenants Act.
The Collaborative Law Act.
The Common Interest Ownership Act.
The Emergency Volunteer Health Practitioners Act.
Adult Guardianship and Protective Proceedings Jurisdiction Act.
Uniform Anatomical Gift Act.
The Landlord-Tenant Act.
Uniform Interstate Family Support Act.
Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act.
Uniform Child Custody Enforcement Act.
Uniform Power of Attorney Act.
And of course, one of the
signature acts of the Uniform Law Commission.
The backbone of American commerce.
The famous Uniform Commercial Code.
All of these acts
keep the vitality within the states and
benefit the people of this nation as a whole.
As a former state legislator, I can tell you from my own experience how important the work of the commission is.
So, Tim, why do these people care?
Well, first of all, this is an arena where businesses, consumers, lawyers intersect and work on law together. When we do a project, we bring in stakeholders. We try to get every interest that we can possibly identify at the table and create, through a collaborative process, a product that's acceptable to all. The other thing that's important is it will affect your practices directly. No matter where you practice, what your field is, some uniform law will touch on it at some point. And it's frankly just helpful as a lawyer to understand where the laws of the states are the same when you're advising your client. I always use the example when I go out to my legislature to try to get funding that we're the people who say, if you own a coffee shop in Austin and you want to open a branch in Albuquerque or Salt Lake or Phoenix, you can do it really easily because you don't need to go hire another lawyer and redo all your forms because the sales law is the same. And that's Article 2 of the UCC. It's really, the same thing is true with child custody. In a country in which people move around, family divorces happen, custody is given, and the custodial and non-custodial parent changes from state to state, it's incredibly important to have uniform law so that it facilitates the ability of people to move but still maintain their family relationships.
I think another thing that's important that I don't really see that often, although I did see it in a brief this past week, and that is that if you are working on a case and you don't have a citation from Texas, you can look to see if another state has adopted the same act that may be at issue, and you can cite that state's opinion. Now, it's not going to be binding on us, but it's certainly going to be very persuasive. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. Also, we see voids in the law all the time. And I think that whenever you all think that there's something that needs to be filled, you might want to go to our website and see if there's already been a Uniform Act passed. It could be something you read through it and know that it's gone through this really good vetting process, and it may be something that we want here in Texas. If nothing else, it may be a model to be used, something to start from rather than just starting from scratch. So I think it's a good idea if you'd like to do that.
I'll tell you a few key facts about the Uniform Law Commission. First of all, we're headquartered in Chicago. We have a very small staff of only 16 people. We're funded by the states, not by the federal government, not by industry, not by interest groups. Our annual budget is about $3 million, and far and away the largest portion of that is paid by dues that the states pay We also get some publishing revenue along with the ELI from the Uniform Commercial Code and other things. And we do get some charitable contributions because we have a foundation, but we're very clear that those are to the foundation and they don't really have any impact. If somebody gives you a grant, it doesn't mean we do something you want us to do. Basically, what are the benefits of having a uniform law? Why should you adopt the Uniform Act instead of creating your own version out of whole cloth? First of all, you have a starting point, and it's a lot easier to work with something that's already been created than it is to write a statute. I don't know how many of you in this room have ever tried to sit and just write a statute. It's hard work. People who do legislative drafting are really smart, and they work at really hard things. And so if you have a uniform law to start with, it's good. Probably the most important thing we do, though, is we facilitate business and life across borders. Again, uniform laws are one of the reasons why interstate business works so well. It's one of the reasons why a mobile society works as well as it does. We can resolve conflicts of law problems. If you have a situation where you have multiple different statutes in different jurisdictions, one of the things we can do is, if you adopt a Uniform Act, it'll put the conflict of law folks out of business. It provides reciprocity of rights and remedies, and that's, I think, really important. One of the things that, at least when I first started practicing law, was you had to go figure out, how do I get my judgment enforced? What's the law in another state? My client would come to me. There used to be a time, I think, when the general practice was, if a client was doing business in another state, a law firm would refer them to a lawyer in that state. I think now more law firms are doing business across state lines, and that having similar law helps with that. We exist really to meet needs. One of the things I always say when I go out to my members' legislatures, if you have something that you think would be a good subject for uniform law, let us know. We're happy to take that back, and we'll go talk about the process in a few minutes. But we are a service organization. I always say to the state legislature, we work for you. You don't work for us. We come to you with what we think is helpful, but you ultimately decide, and if you tell us you need something, we'll do it. A lot of what we do is modifying antiquated legal concepts. There are times, particularly I would say in the last 20 or 30 years, where technology has driven so much change. We help make that work better. The best example I can think of is we developed a remote notarial act, a Uniform Remote Notarial Act, which was a great idea before COVID, but became a critical idea during COVID. You had to be able to notarize documents where people couldn't come to the office. Government offices were shut down, law firms were shut down, lots of things were shut down, and we had an act to do it. We also take common law concepts and codify them, and that's helpful for people, again, because lots of folks who want to know what the law is know enough to go to their state library or state local library and look at a statute. But unless you're a lawyer, you really don't know how to do legal research. And so it also helps the public know what the law is if we do it. What we do also is, I think it's an important thing to think of us as a states' rights organization. Why do I say that? Because part of what we do, as I mentioned before, is to prevent the need for federal preemption. There are areas of traditional state law, sales, property law, family law, where one solution to, obviously, to uniformity would be to simply have the federal government take those areas over. There are two problems with that. Problem one is it probably wouldn't be constitutional under the U.S. Constitution. But problem two is it isn't good for everything to be a matter of federal law. There are lots of things that are matters of local interest and that ought to have local decision makers making those decisions. So part of what we do by creating uniform laws is prevent the need for federal preemption. We help sustain state sovereignty by keeping matters as matters of state law that are important. Again, it's easy to say we need the same law from state to state, let's go to Congress. And well, it used to be easy to say we need the same law from state to state, go to Congress and get it passed. As you all know, it's not easy to get anything passed in Congress these days. So lots of times we're the best solution, a uniform state law that state legislatures can adopt. And the advantage to it is you have both uniformity and diversity. Your state can decide to adopt all or some of a uniform law. It can vary it to meet local customs. When I was introduced mentioned that we had done a couple of model tribal acts. And one of the things we found when we did those is you had to make some adjustments for the fact that Indian tribal governments aren't the same as states, and that tribes have traditions and cultural issues that you need to accommodate. But giving a uniform act they can use as a model is a great way to get that started. So we harmonize things, we reduce costs, we make it easier to do business, but we allow local flexibility and variation. And we have the ability to provide focused, sustained attention to highly technical areas of the law. This year at our annual meeting, which takes place next month, there is a law on special deposits. And I sat through several drafting committee meetings on special deposits. And I will tell you, as an appellate lawyer and sort of general practitioner, it's an incredibly technical, complicated area. But we get the people together, make the statute work, and to produce a product that's usable across the whole country in places where these special deposits are needed.
So the areas that we really have focused on quite a bit are commercial laws. We've talked about the UCC, and there's other acts that are similar to that. Business entity formation, lots of family law, estates and probate, lots of real estate acts, implementation of full faith and credit, interstate enforcement of judgments, ADR, we have an act on collaborative law, we have arbitration, we have mediation, and administrative procedures. We're really the alphabet soup of the law. So when you think about, the UCC, the UCCJEA, UIFSA, the UCA, all of these are from the Uniform Law Commission. So like I say, in Texas, we have enacted 94 uniform laws since 1892, and they include the UCC, the UCCJEA, the Uniform Deceptive Trade Practice Act, UIFSA, having to do with interstate family support enforcement, the Uniform Durable Power of Attorney Act, interstate depositions. We just this past legislative session were able to get a statute passed that will allow the court to create a rule on interstate depositions, and this will really, really be good for us. We will, and so when we have now sent this to our SCAC committee, and once we approve that, any kind of statute that's out there that conflicts with this act will be automatically repealed. And I'm glad to say that now we will be joining 48 other states who have this act. So it's very, very important. And many, many more. I'm certainly not going to go through them, but you can see there's a lot of acts that we have indeed passed here in Texas. So our membership consists, 40% are private practitioners, 14% are government lawyers, 10% state legislators, 5% state and federal judges, and 14% are law professors. We're a nonpartisan body, and we're very, very focused on making sure that these issues are addressed in a nonpartisan, non-ideological manner. Sometimes I know that myself, because I'm a judge, I really try to do everything I can. Of course, we have our own opinions on everything, as we're human beings. But I really try, as when I'm drafting my opinions, to rise above that and make sure that I don't let my personal views get involved. I use that same approach with the uniform acts that I work on. A lot of people take that approach. Others are very opinionated one way or the other, and we make sure that we have a balance on the acts. And I think Tim may want to elaborate on that.
One of the things that you're told, particularly if you're in private practice, is that you leave your clients at the door. The purpose of working on one of these acts is to produce the best law, not to produce something that's beneficial to your client base, whether you're a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer or an insurance defense lawyer or a business transactions lawyer. And people really do. I've seen people who I know, their practice would be something completely different from the position they're arguing, but we try to draft things that are workable, enactable, and ideologically, politically neutral.
So in Texas, you might be saying, well, who are these people? Because I'm sure you never knew that I was a commissioner on the Uniform Law Commission, and I've been doing it for over 20 years. And probably my colleagues know that, but most of you probably didn't. Angela Alexander is our legislative. Under our statute, we have to have somebody from the Legislative Council. So that's her role. We have, many of you know, former Judge Levi Benton from Houston. We have our House parliamentarian, Hugh Brady. We have our state representative, Jeff Leach, who, by the way, really did a lot for us as judges, worked really, really hard, and was not successful, but it certainly was not because he was not trying and is continuing to try. Peter Munson from Sherman, Frank Perez from the Valley, Marilyn Phelan, we have to have, under our statute, we have to have a professor, and she's a professor at Tech. Leonard Reese, who was from Legislative Council for many, many years. Judge Rodney Satterwhite, many of you know from Midland. Another state rep, Reggie Smith. The infamous Harry Tyndall, we all know Harry. He's a commissioner. Karen Washington from Dallas. And the Honorable Lee Yackel, just now retired, our federal judge here in Austin. So those are our Texas commissioners.
What do the commissioners do? This is all volunteer activity. At one point, my state would pay me, I think it was like $14 a day for the few days I was at the annual meeting and nothing for everything else. And I would always sign the check over to my law firm because I figured I was being paid by the law firm to do no charge work. And so the state paid me, I owed it back to the law firm. But what do? We serve on committees. And probably the two most important kinds are what are called study and drafting committees. And in a minute, I'll explain to you why those are important. But the conference has a lot of committees. We represent our appointed states on the drafting committees and on at the annual meeting. One of the things when I was trying to get funding for the Arizona Commission put back into the budget, we were zeroed out at one point as an economy measure, was to explain to the legislature, it is important to have people from each state involved in this process. Why? Because you want your point of view to be, of your state and the interests of your state to be considered. If you left it to people from one or two states, you'd end up with laws that didn't work everywhere. And what else do we do? And this is, in some ways, the most important thing we do, but the more invisible part of it, is we take the uniform and model laws back to the states and assist our legislatures in getting them considered and enacting them, and sometimes in taking changes back to the Uniform Law Conference because you see something in a state that doesn't work for your state, or you can think of a better way to do something. The process is really exceptional. If you look at how we do it, we really, really work hard. My running joke for my law partners, because I disappear for a week every year, is I've done this for 30 years now. My wife has seen 30 beautiful American cities, and I've seen 30 hotel ballrooms. Why? Because we work. We start on a Friday. We work all day Friday, all day Saturday, half of Sunday, all day Monday, all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, and then leave on Thursday. So we're there working. And working means that you're sitting there on the floor reading these acts line by line and debating them. And you're debating them, and you would say, well, how come an appellate lawyer, going to be useful on something like special deposits? And what I always say to my folks is you need to have somebody who's not an expert reading these things, because not everybody who's going to be a lawyer tries to apply them. Not everybody who's going to be a judge who's going to rule on them is going to be a specialist in special deposits, for example. And so one of the things that we do is appoint non-specialists to our drafting committees to make sure that someone who isn't in the subject area can understand what we've done.
So this is what I really want you all to get from this, and that is the process. How does this actually work? So, because it's very, very detailed, and it's very, very, there's a process that is really adhered to. So we start out with a study committee, then it goes to drafting committee, and then it goes to enactment. So what does that mean? First of all, we have a study committee. So this goes to our committee on scope, which is very important. We do not want to take on a project that's not going to be enacted by any state because they're very expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars, because our commissioners travel from all over the country, as do our advisors and our experts. And so once scope decides that this is a project we may want to consider, it goes to a study committee is then created. Right now, I'm on a study committee that has to do with ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so we have studied whether or not we need to have a uniform act. As you all know, there was a case before the Supreme Court that was possibly going to find the ICWA to be unconstitutional. Now, the case came out just last week and found that it wasn't constitutional. So that's a study committee which consists of commissioners, observers, and advisors from around the country discuss the matter in person or by Zoom now, sometimes, probably every other month for a year, and then make a recommendation to scope and to our executive committee leadership. We were going to, our decision on this particular act was going to depend in large part on what the Supreme Court did with the Indian Child Welfare Act. Now then, since it's been determined that it's not unconstitutional, there's going to be less of a need for a uniform act because, of course, if it was unconstitutional, then the individual states would have probably come in to fill that void. My guess is that now the recommendation is to take it for further study because some states have still enacted laws in this area, even though there is a federal act, and we may recommend going forward, we may not. But it's a very intense process. So that's gone on for a year. Now we will take it on for probably, I'm guessing, if leadership approves, for another year. And that's just deciding whether or not that we're going to actually take on a project. Once leadership decides that we should take on a project, then we search for people who are experts in the area, who understand this area of law, and who have divergent opinions. We want to make sure that everybody is just not, echoing each other. For example, in the Indian Child Welfare Act, we have a lot of people on that committee who are members of tribes, as we should. That's very, very important. But we also have to be careful that we have people on the other side of that, which are people from the adoption area, people from the child protection area, because there's always that balance between the tribal needs and the needs of the individual child at issue. And so we search for that. We ask also for observers to come in. If you all see and look on our website that we are working on a particular act that you might be interested in, please come and see us because we welcome observers to come in and to openly participate. I and Tim both have chaired many committees over the years, and different committee chairs handle it differently. But I know that when I've been chair, I welcome the observers to even sometimes vote on issues. Especially if there's a tie, then we may have to just have the commissioners vote. But I try to include the observers so that they realize that their input really, really is valued.
And observers are incredibly important, and it's a challenge. When we were doing the tribal acts, one of the biggest challenges we had was to get participation by the Indian tribes, because our vision of a nightmare was a bunch of off-reservation lawyers sitting there in a room by themselves writing a law for Indian tribes with no input from the tribes themselves. So it was critical that we do that. And the same thing with other areas of law. We have a committee right now that's drafting a revision of the Uniform Determination of Death Act, and we have in that room doctors, law professors, philosophy professors, professors of theology. If you attend one of those meetings, it's sort of like a graduate seminar in medicine, philosophy, law, and theology all at the same time. And the idea is to make sure we have as much input, as many points of view as we can. And then once the drafting committee will usually meet 4 times, twice a year, And we have a 2-year cycle usually to do an act. We can do it more quickly if we need to, and we can take longer if we need to. But it's then taken to the annual meeting, and as I told you before, we read them line by line.
Twice. So we do it after the first year. We read everything line by line, and sometimes we will have debate over where a comma goes, you know, for a long period of time. But it's heavily debated that first year. Then the committee will go back and discuss whatever else they need to do, but also follow up on what has been pointed out from the floor. We have microphones around the floor. There's 350 commissioners. And believe me, these are smart, just like you all, lawyers who come up to that microphone, and they're not going to let anything get by. So things are debated very, very vigorously.
And it's a particularly helpful process, again, because if you've been on a drafting committee, you kind of are in baseball. You understand what you're talking about. You know what you think you've said. But one of the real benefits to the line-by-line reading in front of the whole conference is you have people who aren't experts who look at it and say, I know you think this says that, but it really doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And if you get it enacted by the legislature, some poor judge somewhere is going to have to figure out what we intended it to mean. And that's never as good as saying what you intend to mean. So the process is incredibly rigorous. If you sat through a day of an annual meeting, you'd see really, really good lawyers, both law professors, judges, legislators, private practice lawyers, working something over and making it the best product we possibly can make it.
I was the chair of the committee one time. This was many years ago. And after our first year of drafting, which a lot is involved in that process also, we went to annual meeting, and after the debate, it was clear that there really was not a need for this act. And so I went back to leadership and said, you know, I really think we need to dissolve this committee. And in fact, we did do that. It's such a good process that, as you all know, I'm the chair of the Permanent Commission on Children, Youth, and Families for the court. And we are in the process right now of drafting standards for representation of children. And when they first approached me with it, it was, you know, we just want to get a few people together and draft these standards, and that'll be it. And I said, no, we don't need to do that. And so we are actually following the protocol of the Uniform Law Commission. We have a reporter from Baylor who is, that's another thing we didn't mention, we have a reporter on all of our acts. So we have somebody who is a professor from a law school, an accredited law school, who is there taking very, very good notes and then drafting the statute with the input of the committee. And so that's a very, very important role also. The next thing we're going to talk about, Tim needs to talk about, because enactment, as a judge, of course, I cannot lobby. And so I don't do that, but that's something that Tim does a lot.
Each year we have usually in June, we have a call of our delegations to create a legislative plan for the year. And what we do, for example, in Arizona, is we only have 3 commissioners in Arizona, so our meetings are a lot smaller, but we decide what we're going to take to the legislature next year. And sometimes it's something we think is going to go final in July, and sometimes it's something that we've had it sitting on the shelf for a while. And once we do that, we then go to the legislature and try to find a sponsor for the bill and get it enacted. And what does that mean? It means you end up going out and testifying at the legislature. First time I ever testified for the Uniform Law Commission, it was on the Electronic Recording of Real Property Transactions Act. And I signed in and I said, I'm Tim Berg from NCC USL. And they call my bill, and the chair of the committee says, we have only one question for you, Mr. Berg. What is NCC USL? So then I had to explain what we did. They didn't have any questions about the act. It was such a good act, it went through without any comment. But we're supported by the ULC staff. They have legislative lawyers. This year in Arizona, we had somebody from the Chicago office come out and help us testify because the subject we were dealing with was very technical. You get people from the drafting committee to help you. One year we had a project called UPMIFA, Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act. And we actually had a lawyer from Connecticut. We got a grant for this, and he went around the country speaking to state and local bar associations about the act and what the benefits were. It was incredibly helpful in terms of getting it passed because you had the nonprofit bar then behind it. And frankly, most of the people in the legislature didn't know a lot about it, so when the nonprofit bar told them it was a good idea, it got enacted.
So I think we've talked a lot about the meetings and how exceptional they are. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, my most vivid recollection of the annual meeting is the high quality of the floor debate about a pending proposed uniform law. So I think that what I really hope that you get out of this, these are some more quotes by Justice O'Connor, is that there really is this resource that you can go to whenever you see a void in the law. And if it's to cite a case, if it's to try to negotiate a contract with somebody in another state who's also enacted, like, for example, the definition of sale under our UCC or whatever, you have this as a resource that you can go to. It is handled in an exceptional way and covers so much subject matter, more than I think people realize. We have a website you can go to.
Yeah, we have a website that you can go to. It has information about the organization. It'll show you what the current drafting committees are. It'll show you where our acts are in terms of where they've been introduced, where they've been adopted. They're actually drafts of the current project, so you can look at them. One of the things I want to encourage you to do, just as Justice Lehrmann did, is if you have ideas for uniform acts, please send them to the Chicago office. One of the things the Scope and Program Committee does is meet to discuss proposed projects. In fact, the meeting is this coming Monday. We're doing it remotely this year. But what you do, we get suggestions from commissioners, but we get them from we actually had a young man who was a high school student, for one of his projects sent us a proposal for a uniform law. And we had somebody study it for the meeting. We had a meeting of Scope and Program. We ultimately didn't do that project. We ended up writing a very nice letter saying, we are incredibly impressed, and when you're ready, try to be a uniform law commissioner about 20, 30 years from now, because we think you do a wonderful job. But we really do, we're a resource. I say to legislatures, we've got a body of acts. If you think you're interested in something, go to our website and see if we have one. If you have an idea and we don't have one, bring it to us. We are a service organization. We are funded by the states as part of state government. I always go to the legislature when I do my annual round and say, hi, I'm the chair of the least known Arizona agency, because nobody knows who we are. We don't have a staff. We don't have an office. We don't do any procurement. I get all this stuff about how you do procurement for state government, and we don't ever do any of it. But we really want your input. We want your involvement. We want you to understand what it is we do. We're really proud of what we do. In some ways, this is to me the single most single best accomplishment of my professional career. I do a lot of cases for lots of clients. I've made constitutional law in Arizona, and that's something. But when you do something like work on a tribal act that lets Indian tribes begin to do more economic development, you're really doing good, and I think that's what we're doing here.
And I echo that. And also, Tim is the president-elect. I must say, the most professional thing that I'm proud of is my work on the court. So I don't want to in any way say, Chief, that that's not. But ULC is just right there under it.
And please, none of you tell any of my law partners I said that the ULC is my
But again,
professional accomplishment.
Thank you all for coming early. I know it was hard to get up. I want to thank my colleagues for being here as always. You're wonderful. And if you have any questions, come up and visit with us. We'd be glad to answer any of your questions. And mainly, thank you for what you all do. The third branch of government is so important, and it's never been more important than it is right now. And we see this throughout the country. We all, 9 of us, I can speak for the court, we all appreciate you, truly. And I can tell you that Chief Hecht worked really, really, really hard for the judges this year. I mean, I cannot tell you how many hours he put into this. I mean, really, really a lot. We were very disappointed that some things did not turn out the way that we wished they would have. We are definitely going to be pushing, and I guarantee you the Chief will, during the special sessions, to make sure that our judiciary remains one of the best in the country. Because even though we are low in pay, we certainly are not low in caliber. And we want to continue having that high level. So thank you all for what you do, and thank you for having us here today.
I think our President-elect, Steve Bennett, said it best about halfway through the presentation when he exclaimed, "Wow." I didn't know anything about this, and this presentation was interesting and informative. Thank you, Justice Lehrmann and Timothy. You know, thank you not only for your presentation, but thank you for your combined 50 years of service on the Uniform Law Commission. Chief Justice Hick, thank you for your presentation on the state of judiciary. I can tell you, in speaking on behalf of the bar, that we all believe that our judges need to be paid more. And I can commit to you, as I'm sure many in this room will, that we stand behind you and with you and hope that you get the pay raise you deserve. So, having said that, we have a full day of CLE programs ahead. During today's general session luncheon, Cindy Tisdale will be sworn in as the 143rd President of the State Bar of Texas. And congratulations to you, Cindy. Now it's time to get more CLE hours. Thanks for joining us this morning, and have a good day.